Good evening. Breaking news tonight. Superstorm Sandy crashing ashore in southern New Jersey in the last hour. 2.8 million people without power. The water is rising from Atlantic City to lower Manhattan to Long Island. Cars are floating down the streets in lower Manhattan. An extraordinary sight. You're looking live now at New York City's West 57th Street. Just 3 blocks from our CNN studio, where a crane on top of a luxury skyscraper collapsed this afternoon. It's been dangling precariously over Midtown ever since, and Superstorm Sandy's high winds mean it could come crashing down at any moment. The streets have been closed off around it, and nearby buildings have been evacuated. Meanwhile, the facade of an apartment building in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood has collapsed tonight. New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn will be calling in live from the scene in just a few moments. And CNN's best people all across the storm for us tonight. Ali Velsh's in Atlantic City, Erin Burnett here in New York at Battery Park, where the water is already higher than it may have ever been before. Jason Carroll's in Lindenhurst, Long Island, where the worst of the storm is hitting right now. Plus, Chad Myers is tracking the path of this dangerous storm from a CNN Severe Weather Center. Now I want to go to Erin Burnett, who's in New York's Battery Park, where the water is at record levels. Erin, I've been watching you all night, but there's been a dramatic escalation in the depth of this water, even in the last half an hour. Tell me what's going on right now.
Well, I can tell you what's going on right now, Piers. We're at about 13.54 feet for the storm surge right here in lower Manhattan, and that is a record. The last time that it was anywhere close to this was back in 1960 during the storm named Donna, when the water came up to just over 10 feet, 10.02 feet. So we are clearly at a record, and as you can see where I am now, and I'm just watching where I step because obviously the water is really murky and it's hard to see, it's dark out. But, you know, all the way, we are, as you can see, where that barrier is there, Piers, that is where the Hudson River begins and where we are right now. And where we are in Battery Park was part of the city that was evacuated, but I have to tell you, Piers, there are some people who are still down here. But Battery Park is completely now surrounded by water on all sides. And you just mentioned some of the flooding across Manhattan that we're seeing, with some places further on the eastern side of the island where you have cars that are literally floating in the street. There's also, of course, been a lot of power out across a wide swath of lower Manhattan, although I will say here in Battery Park, again, where it was a mandatory evacuation, power is still on. But just to give you a sense, Piers, I mean, how I'm walking here, I mean, this has never happened before in recorded history for Manhattan. And the water's just literally lapping up here. And this is part of what you're seeing across the city. And New York City subways are starting to flood now to some of those entrances. And that, Piers, was one of the biggest risks that there could have been. That subway system, as you know, on a sunny day, if they don't have pumps trying to clear the water out of the system, can flood. You get the salt water in, it could be really elevate this disaster to a whole new level when it comes to New York City's transit system, the biggest, of course, in the country. So we're going to continue to monitor this, Piers. We'll be back out here live at 11 o'clock Eastern as we keep watching this water rise. And I'll tell you, Piers, we're going to hit the peak level for the water here in lower Manhattan, still to come in just about 30, 29, 28 minutes from now. Back to you.
Yeah, really quite extraordinary. She's never seen anything like this in New York. We are hearing, Erin, just quickly before you go, there may have been some fires in subways. Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard. I've seen those same reports, but I'm not able to confirm, you know, directly whether that has happened. But I've heard that, and I can tell you, Piers, you know, that where we are, if you look behind me, obviously you see trees, but the lights behind that across the Hudson River, that's New Jersey. And we had seen lights going there as if there were some transformer explosions lower on the ground earlier tonight. So as you continue to see all this water flow in and hit all these electricity sources, I mean, this is obviously going to be a very real risk, especially when you look at the subway where you have that third rail with all that high voltage that rolls there. Once the water gets to that point, it becomes incredibly difficult for them to deal with.
Yeah, Erin, we'll come back to you a little bit later. Thanks very much for now. Christine Quinn is New York City Council Speaker. Right. She's on the scene of that building collapse in the Chelsea neighborhood. She joins me on the phone now. Christine, we saw the images of this building. It appeared to be an almost total collapse of the facade, if not the whole building itself. What can you tell me?
Yeah, basically appears as though the front of the building just fell off. It looks like you're looking in the back of a dollhouse, actually, when you're looking in the front of it. Some of the folks in the building called 911 because debris was coming off the front. The NYPD came, immediately evacuated the building, did a terrific job. Fire department then came while they were trying to secure the building. The front of it fell off onto 8th Avenue. No one, first responder or people in the building, were injured. Thank goodness. It appears as though the building, which looks like a residential building if you were on 8th Avenue, may have been an illegal tourist hotel, because all 15 people in the building were Austrian tourists. So we're going to need to follow up to see if there were perhaps some illegal conversion issues that may have contributed to what the storm, did, and that if there may have been a structurally unsound situation that the storm was able to prey on.
And Christine,
if
I could jump in, do you know the latest on this crane, which we actually, we heard a huge thunderbolt go off mid-afternoon, this crane on 57th Street. I heard it right, it was in the CNN offices. We all ran to the window. We saw that the crane had basically buckled, and it's been dangling ever since then in what seems to be an ever more precarious way. In the last half hour or so, swaying dramatically from side to side, which must be loosening the way that it's being held there. Do you have an update for us on what the plan is for this?
I think they are. The most recent update I have heard, and that could certainly change, is that although they were going to try to walk up the stairs of the building, that they were not particularly confident that given the high winds that they would be able to necessarily secure it in any way. The challenge is finding a way to secure it that doesn't risk the life of the people who are trying to do the securing. So the most recent update as I have, they were trying to discern through walking up as high as they could whether there was anything they could do. The police and fire have evacuated a large ring around where the crane is, cleared all of the businesses out, the few residential buildings, and also the couple of hotels that were there, and moved everybody out.
And finally, we're getting conflicting reports of potential fatalities this evening. One was confirmed, we believed earlier, of a man who died apparently hit by a tree. But there are reports of up to 5 more fatalities, but they're unconfirmed as far as I'm aware. Are you able to confirm how many people may have lost their lives in New York tonight?
The only confirmed fatality I have is the 30-year-old man who was hit by a tree. I cannot confirm to you any of the others.
Christine, for now, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
All right. Take care.
The crane that's been hanging over Midtown Manhattan for hours now has been battered by the high winds of Superstorm Sandy. Joining me now on the phone is a crane expert, Tom Barth. Mr. Barth, thank you for joining me. You've been 40 years as an operator on cranes. I suppose the most obvious question many New Yorkers will be asking, as this crane dangles so dangerously, is why wasn't it better attached? How's this been able to happen, given we had nearly a week of warning that this huge storm was coming?
Well, looking at the pictures and everything else, what I believe happened is that the crane operator and the supervision on the job did not follow the manufacturer's recommendation. When the crane operator gets out of the crane, they let it weather vane. They knew the storm was coming. They should have lowered the boom down at a low angle. That way, when the wind comes in, it can blow the crane around, back and forth. That way the wind would have been on the back of the boom, forcing it down onto what holds the boom up as pennant lines. But that didn't happen. And that's why it went over backwards. The strong gust of wind came back and just threw it over backwards.
The building is called 157. It's a pretty iconic building in New York. When it's finished, it'll be 90 stories high, and it will be the highest residential skyscraper in the city. So clearly a lot of interest around here, but that area is densely populated, and it seems to me, and I'm not an expert, you are, that there must be a very high danger of this buckled crane actually being blown off now, off its wrench there, and possibly landing or being blown several blocks into any of the buildings around there. Could that happen?
Absolutely, it could happen. There's several different scenarios. If you see that boom hanging down, let's say the house swings around and the boom gets into the arms that are holding the crane up, that come out of the building. If it hits that, there's a possibility they can break, then the crane's coming down.
Even as I'm talking to you, we're seeing live pictures of the crane swaying quite dramatically. Would that indicate to you that it is near to coming off? And if so, what can anybody do about this? Is there anything to stop it now? You can't get up there, presumably.
The thing to do is get everybody out of the way. If the crane should fall, make sure nobody's in the area. you know, it's up there about 1,000 feet, right? You don't know how it's going to fall. So I would get everybody away 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice, Mr. Barr. Thank you. I'm going to have to interrupt you, sir. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
I'm going to go now to Jason Carroll. He's on Long Island, where the worst of Sandy is battering down the town of Lindenhurst right now. Jason, we can see the pictures of you there live. Clearly, a big, big storm has hit there and a lot of water. What are you experiencing?
Well, Pierce, the story here is without question flooding. If you take a look right behind me here, this is Montauk Highway. And just about an hour ago, to give you some perspective, we could drive through here. I mean, it was dry, at least in this one particular spot. But it has breached here. It has breached in several other sections. And that's the story we're seeing here. In this particular area of Lindenhurst, you'll see a lot of canals that are checkered throughout the area. Right down this street here, this is a street, though it doesn't look like it. It's hard to see. It is not a canal. It is completely flooded, and there have been several streets like this. We've been here throughout the day.
Incredible pictures.
And if just to give you a little bit more perspective, you know, down the street is where we could have stood just a few hours ago. And again, the water just keeps continuing to rise, keeps continuing to grow here. Even earlier when I was speaking to some of the last residents who are holding out until the very last possible moment because Lindenhurst is under a mandatory evacuation, they decided they were going to hang on, but the water just decided to rise too much for them to stay. Pierce?
Jason, keep doing a great job for us, and we'll come back to you later on. Thank you very much for now. I now want to bring in Ali Velshi. He's been out in the middle of the storm for Atlantic City all day. Ali, I've been following your quite extraordinarily heroic performance reporting for us from this ever-deepening sea of water that you've been standing in all afternoon. Yeah. First of all, thank you for what you've been doing. You've been bringing in the most vivid and dramatic reporting to us all. And everyone who was thinking of going out, I hope, has watched you and not gone out, which is the very service that you've been performing for the wider public. What is it like there now? It looks absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it's gotten worse just in the last little while. You can see this. This is the ocean. This is downtown Atlantic City, and the ocean has washed over us. In fact, not only is this the ocean that we had earlier today, Piers, but it's full of vegetation now. It's full of seaweed and debris from the ocean, which means it's overtopped the barriers, which are about 3/4 of a mile behind me. You can see the lights of the strip of Atlantic City behind me. It's become much colder. It does feel like we've got the back end of the storm now. I see what Jason's getting. We got that much earlier, and then for the last 2 hours, it's been calm. I was able to see the moon. The sky was completely clear. We were in the center of the storm. This, I'm sure Chad can tell me better than I can, this is the back end of the storm. The rain has now picked up. The wind has now picked up. You saw me standing here earlier today, Piers. I was standing on dry ground. There was some water around me. Then the water started to come up. Now it's up to thigh level, and we are still half an hour away, probably. Well, yeah, about half an hour away from high tide. There's a sense of it. You see a truck driving through, so you can see how high that water is. The only trucks driving through here are police, fire, and these guys who are the boardwalk patrol because of the fact that it's a curfew. There's a 6 p.m. onward curfew. This is pretty serious at this point. It's still going to get higher. And Piers, here's the thing. It's 60 miles due west here to Philadelphia. They are going to get the rain. They are going to start to get this flooding. That's a flood-prone area. So people in Philadelphia are now getting very, very concerned about what the effect the floods are going to have over there. But in this area, if you're not out, you're at home because it is under curfew and travel ban, and you can't get out of most of these areas on the shore anyway at this point, Piers.
And Ali, very quickly, Chris Christie's been pretty scathing about the mayor of Atlantic City, saying that he basically went against his instructions. What can you tell me about that, and how much of a problem will that be for the mayor if indeed people do get trapped and potentially even lose their lives?
Well, we were talking to the mayor of Atlantic City on air earlier, and I had asked him, I said, look, it's about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What do you do if you haven't left? Because the roads have started to become overtopped. And he said at that point, if you're not out, stay where you are, get to high ground. Chris Christie then took exception to some of his comments that I'm not sure the situation on the ground makes the mayor wrong. I agree there should have been a great emphasis on getting people out of town. Most did. About 400 or 500 remain in shelters in Atlantic City, but the mayor's concern is that some people didn't go to shelters. They're just at home, and there's no services to help them. So unclear as to at what point the mayor should have said, don't leave, but the point at which he said it did seem to annoy Governor Chris Christie. That's for those guys to work out. I'm not sure who was right in that one.
Well, it's certainly an unprecedented scene, so I can imagine a lot of chaos going on all over the region this evening. Ali, for now, we'll definitely be back to you. Thank you very much indeed for your continued excellent reporting from that remarkable picture there, that you've been standing there with the water just coming up and up and up. We're going to go down to Chad Myers very briefly before the break.